And leaders, in turn, are always shaping environment and society. It's a dynamic exchange. And so, just a quick journey through history. Hunter-gatherer society, 100,000 or so years ago where it begins, or at least that's recorded in history. Hunter-gatherer teams, groups, families, tribes live in small groups of about 50 or so. Leadership is a distributed experience, right? Men and women have equal roles. Guess why? It's all hands on deck, right? There's no time for hierarchy and order. It's just survival. And so decision-making is distributed, leadership is distributed, roles are gender neutral. People do what they need to do to get by, right? This changes as we move forward in history, not that far forward, and so maybe 15 to 12,000 years ago, we began to see a shift in human experience in the form of farming. Farming comes in. What starts to happen when you have farming? You have domesticated animals, you have my property versus your property, we have the season that needs to be predicted, we have sudden relationship with boundary and fixity and order and structure in a way that the hunter-gatherers simply didn't have because they just moved and responded to situations, right? So as you start having boundaries and times and seasons, now you start having greater sense of wonder about what's it going to take for my crops to survive? What's the mysterious power that controls the crops? There must be a what? God. And so religion starts showing up, and hierarchy and chieftains and boundaries start showing up. And this lasts for a while. And then we have the emergence about about 6,000 or 8,000 years ago is the city-states. The city-states now have, the farming has become so centralized, people have moved into central locations, their buildings are completely fixed. So now we have governance, we have rules, we have property rights, we have all kinds of laws to protect each person from the other person. We have clearly the emergence of government, but it's in the form usually of kings and queens, right? And if you look at the ancient structures of the city-states when they came around, the two tallest buildings in every city-state is what? The palace and the church. Those are the power centers, right? As a matter of fact, if you look around most cities today, it's still the case, right? You have the churches and so whatever the holy site is, and whatever the house of governance is, those are the tallest. And that tells you something about the society. And so leadership now is a little more hierarchical. There are people who have the rights and the power, and there's the beginning of classes of people, not the beginning, but the real sort of formalization of classes of people. And so then let's move quickly forward in history, only because I said the 7 hours, it's really just 3 hours. Industrial Revolution has happened. Who's the history buff here? Any ideas?
1890.
1750, so really close. 1750, Industrial Revolution, 250 years ago. And what we have now is a real change in human experience. Mechanization and automation and the capacity to build things at scale is changing not only the way people can eat and dress and what they wear and where they live, but now we have the emergence of a new class of wealth. It's not just the kings or the churches. It's now we have the sort of the wealthy owners, and we have this very strong sense of leadership as a caretaker. The wealthy, powerful are the ones who are the parental characters, and other people are children, and they're treated as such. And now fast forward one more time, we have modern day, the digital age. This, by the way, is the latest and greatest tech building. Recognize that? Apple headquarters. Yeah, that's the new Apple headquarters. I thought they'd make an apple, but they made a circle. So the industrial revolution is then surpassed by, or more recently, by the digital revolution. The digital revolution, as we call it, is not even 50 years old. It's not even 50 years old. We are living into a time that is now accelerated. By the way, at the time of the Industrial Revolution, around 1750, the population of humans on Earth is about 800 million people. 800 million people in 1750. We are past 7 billion 250 years later. So a lot changes, and not the least of which is the pressure that we're putting on the planet, on each other, on resources. But we have this digital revolution. We have the growth in in global organizations, we have a change from leadership as a simple transactional experience to this complex, multifaceted, what do they call that? Matrix organizations and businesses, giant global corporations. In effect, we've arrived at a time, and why this is becoming sort of so critical, is we've arrived at a time where the church is no longer the premier driver of moral authority on the planet, nor is the government. But it went from that to the farming, to the cities, to government and religion, to business. Business has found itself suddenly as the stewards of society. Business is not originally designed to be a steward of society function. Business was designed to do what? What was the sort of intention of business? What? Trade goods in particular to do what? Make money, right? Create a profit for the shareholders. That was the purpose of business. And now we're seeing that is not really what's happening anymore. Business is forced into, not by design, but by default, becoming the stewards, the guardians, the bastions, the vanguard of culture, of humanity. And it's a startling moment for us in history because we are unprepared for this. This was not what we signed up for, and yet it's inevitable. As a matter of fact, Walmart and Dick's Sporting Goods would not, on my list, be the top of the exemplars of conscious business. And yet, we have this massive trend and awful experience of these school shootings, and they come out and say, no more. By the way, is our government doing something really significant about this? They're debating it. There's a lot of discussion, but who's doing something about it? Business. Big business. Walmart, Dick's. They're saying, you know what? We are stewards of society. We are guardians of culture. This is unacceptable. We're going to do something about it. It becomes a really interesting conversation that we can't just claim ignorance and go about our day-to-day. We have to do something about it. The CEO of Delta, I love this statement, our values are not for sale. Do you know what this was kerfuffle all about? Delta stopped their relationship with the NRA saying, we don't accept this behavior, we don't condone this behavior. The lieutenant governor of Georgia, right, said, well, if you're not supporting the NRA, we're going to rescind your tax credits on gasoline. And the CEO said, hey, values are not for sale. Business holding a moral position. And so how do we make that personal? That's sort of the inquiry for me. How do you make that real? How do you, as a leader, bring more of that consciousness into your day-to-day for your own evolution, which, by the way, you get this one precious life. What are you doing with it? We don't get a redo. We don't get a makeover. This is it. And time swiftly passes by. So what do we do? So I'm proposing we combine them. We pursue and live our life into whatever it means to be a conscious, evolving person, and I'll talk about that, and we continue to provide value as a leader. So this conscious leadership for me has layers, right? It's a bit of an onion.